Excellent. All right, so without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker of the affirmative team to the floor. I've seen enough sci-fi movies to know that outsourcing our youth's critical thinking to AI is probably a bad idea. Canterbury believes that adding ChatGPT to the classroom context adds nothing and only stops kids from practicing skills they would otherwise need in the real world. What do we need to prove here today? Well, that the use of ChatGPT inherently atrophies important parts of children's skills, and as an educational institution which is aiming to develop said skills, must stand to stop this use. 2 points for you today. Number one, explaining in depth exactly why ChatGPT's use is inherently harmful, even if they come out with like some fringe niche uses that apparently will be good for the future. And two, why they will get more of the worst ChatGPT cheating abuses on their side of the house. But before I get into those 2 points, I'd like to do a bit of setup on what our side actually looks like. Canterbury stands for a world where schools value students' critical thinking skills, and so ban use of ChatGPT in school assignments by students. What this looks like is blocking it off the school Wi-Fi, running work through software AI detectors to check out the worst of these things, and treating the use of ChatGPT like any other type of plagiarism. If a student went and got his older brother to collate a bunch of sources, pull out all the themes, and tell him exactly what he should write about in each paragraph, and what ideas they were best to write about in what order, we would stand against that because pulling out themes and ideas is part of the learning. Why is it any different here? Some characterization of what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT and all these algorithms that develop English responses are constantly adapting and being revolutionized every 10 seconds. Uniquely, one, because billions and billions of dollars are being poured into these technologies for new development because these are so buzzy in the news right now. And two, because machine learning means that inherently it's constantly adapting, constantly changing the way it thinks about things, and the way nodes and antinodes are being created to see how it reacts to different inputs is constantly changing as well. This means two things that are devastating for that case. One, whatever ChatGPT tips and tricks that they're going to try to prove that they'll teach kids are mostly going to become irrelevant in a few months, yet alone over decades. And two, that like most new technologies, ChatGPT will become increasingly intuitive over time as it better adapts to human needs and more money is spent on getting it to adapt to human needs, which means that it won't actually be that difficult to get all the good outputs of ChatGPT that if somebody so wants to achieve that. Furthermore, it's worth pointing out right from the start, ChatGPT has no algorithm for truth. It's just a robot that tries to predict what word comes after the word it's currently saying to the highest probability of what would meet whatever input you put in. What this means is that it just makes up more facts than debaters talking policy. It's really, really bad. This means it often spits out outright ridiculous claims. I was playing around with it the other day to make it say true and real things. True and fake things. For a fake thing, it names an entirely real fact, and for the true things, it names 10 different fake facts. This is the kind of ridiculous stuff that we're having students put in their essays. We don't like this. Alright, let's go into the first point. How there is no reason to use ChatGPT as a student. But yeah, I'll take it away.
Do you not see that it's likely to become more and more relevant in the workplace and in everyday lives into the future?
It'll become more and more intuitive. I think in general, most people can type in, do this thing for me, and employees can have copy and paste scripts to do that kind of thing. And as well, but I think uniquely, employers want people who can come up with their own ideas, develop new skills, etc. that we're going to prove inherently are atrophied on their side of the house. This point will be probably back and forth for quite a bit in this debate, but I think it's reasonable to know that also the intuitiveness point and the fact that it's constantly changing means that what skills you do teach them will become less relevant, and any average Joe will probably be able to do these tricks. Alright, so then, what's the first type of way that ChatGPT could be used? Writing. We expect them to probably try ban this in most cases in their educational institutions too, but if they do stand for some sort of ridiculous world where universities send out an essay prompt and you type in write an essay about this thing, and then you scroll through and maybe make changes here or there, we're going to explain why that is bad if they do stand for that. One, writing is really important. Knowing how to thoughtfully put together words is something that people need to practice. In fact, most of the things I'm going to hit in this point are skills that really need practice. Every time you go over them again in a school context is like entrenching those patterns of learning in your brain that every time they don't do that and just type something into an AI generator, they do not develop. What happens is that we have kids who have less like practice skills in all of these things. But yeah, writing is important. Knowing how to thoughtfully put together words is something people need to practice. One, because AI-generated texts kind of all blend together if everybody's making AI-generated text. And also because people just talk, right? You don't have ChatGPT in your ear 24/7. Knowing and practicing how to put together words and to communicate yourself is something that's always going to be important. All right, application 2 of ChatGPT they might try to claim. Research. What this might look like is a student asking ChatGPT for a bunch of facts and the sources for those facts. Firstly, as we've said, ChatGPT has literally no algorithm to determine truth. In fact, to do such a thing is like something AI researchers have been studying for decades, and they've mainly concluded it's impossible. What it just does is predicts what word best follows the current one. This leads to a few harms. One, when research comes out of this, it could well be untrue, meaning that this like practice of learning how to use ChatGPT to get a bunch of sources isn't going to be something that's wanted in the real world because those sources aren't going to be true. Employers want true facts, just in general. Second, ChatGPT, because it's like this unpredictable algorithm that even its own coders don't understand, means that there are like really unpredictable algorithmic biases in what information it actually puts forward and presents to you as the viewer in a way that you would be entirely unable to meaningfully predict. What that means is that ChatGPT could really like articles because it's just being found in like layer 10 of its 10 billion like layer pattern recognition system. That articles that say the word cheese a bunch of times are like way more trustworthy than articles that don't. What that means is that you get all these biases in your research that you don't even know are happening. Furthermore, if we want an algorithm that just like collates links for kids to look through themselves and find out facts, that's just Google. They're approaching our side of the house here. ChatGPT is going to be unique in the fact that it will extract ideas from those links, and in doing so, I think this is particularly bad because when ChatGPT just takes out ideas, it means that kids aren't reading through the articles and getting the full context of these ideas, which means that they're not learning how to research. This is really bad. Maybe the third thing they might try to claim ChatGPT is good for, generating ideas. So, e.g., like a student being like, what's a list of ideas for my short film? This is really bad, but ChatGPT is inherently unoriginal. It's not generative, it just takes stuff that already exists and puts it out in a new order. What this means is that ideas will be like flavorless, will be unoriginal, kids won't be like practicing their ability to come up with their own ideas, which is like less interesting for teachers, less interesting for employers, but also means kids are less proud of their work. And any of like the practice of kids coming up with their own ideas, a skill we want people to meaningfully practice again and again and again over their education system, is really poor. And then point number 4, theme extraction. Like if I want to say what are the themes of Moby Dick, I think this has the same problems of research with like the added harms of the fact that an AI is just like taking ideas from Sporkle here and there from a bunch of other like articles and then trying to like mush them all together, which might like take away from the theses of any of the individual articles that are trying to make any of the individual claims. I'm running out of a bit of time on how they get more rule breaking on their side, so I might pick that up if she so chooses to. Thank you so much. I'm glad the speech wasn't generated by
All right, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite you to call the first speaker onto the gauge stage.
Sorry, one second. It doesn't work, guys. Not good. I can't be honest. No, it's all good.
Oh, okay.
Just go without my picture. There we go.
So my switch in 3, 2, 1. Look, when the calculator was first developed, all these math teachers were like, oh no, everyone was no longer going to be able to do maths, our world is going to collapse on its head. However many years later, calculators are very commonly used in schools. People can still do math. It's just a supplementary tool that makes it easier, makes it more accessible, makes it more engaging. 4 things to do for you in my speech. Firstly, on some rebuttal. Secondly, on setup, and then 2 substantive points. 1 on how it actually benefits learning inside the classroom, and 2 how we better prepare students for the future. Okay, firstly on some rebuttal, what we heard from side F to begin with was how they were going to stop it being used in schools. We heard that they're going to block it, we heard that they're going to use software to detect it. I'd just like to point out that I don't think this will be very effective. If you try and block something, there are VPNs. If you try and have software detecting, I think it's pretty easy to get ChatGPT to spit you out an essay, and then you put it through Google Translate a few times, fix up the grammar, problem solved, right? Okay. Secondly, on how it's not useful if teachers just teach you tips and tricks. They've also said that AI is going to develop and outpace everybody, won't be able to keep up. I think so that means that you need to teach kids the elasticity to be able to engage with this developing technology, and I'll expand on that later. The main other thing that we heard, and I'd just like to note that this all relied on the same underlying premise of 1, people suddenly now only use ChatGPT, or 2, the ideas are super important. So I think the thing here is 1, people won't only use ChatGPT. You still have to do things in your classroom. There are still things that are kind of difficult to do with ChatGPT, run your 2013 mechanics paper through it, right? I think it's pretty difficult also to sit in an exam and somehow pull out your phone and make ChatGPT do it for you. But on this thing about ideas, I think they don't understand what happens in the status quo. Students don't sit down with the Crucible and think up their all original ideas. They go on Spark Notes and get the notes on the theme. They're not extracting the theme by themselves in the status quo. We don't think this is actually a really big change, and this is the same underlying premise as theme extraction. So now I'm just going to move onto the setup. Okay, firstly, who cheats and when. We think that people are likely to under this side of the house, only likely to cheat during internals or other essays type assessments. 1, because again, I flagged for you can't pull out your phone during a test, and again, because you have to frame questions in such a way that it actually works with the software. So what we think is that there's a lot of assessment that is just kind of immune to ChatGPT because it just is not logistically possible. And secondly, we think that people who cheat are relatively symmetric on either side of the house. Why? Because you have the same instincts to cheat. Either A, you don't want to do the work, B, you find the work too difficult, or C, you just want a better grade, you want to pass. What we think happens is that you just use a different way to cheat. Maybe on the outside of the house, or maybe they think ChatGPT is cheating is terrible. But you can also just get someone to write your essay as they've already flagged for us. It's not cheating, it doesn't only occur with AI. Okay, then on what do we support? We think it should be used during teaching as a jumping off point for discussion. We actually stand by letting people use it in internals and in class assessments, and I'll expand on why it's a good thing for you later. And we also support education working to develop AI collaboratively, and just finding a little bit of framing on universities. We think that it's less relevant in the context of universities. It only probably applies to taught courses, right? Because you can't get ChatGPT to write your PhD, okay? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, I'll take a POI before I move on.
How would you feel as a POC lecturer whose work is less red doing your white counterparts because layer 50 into this algorithm, you'll find out that black names are less successful than white names?
I think that firstly, that's not how ChatGPT works. It doesn't actually credit the lecturers by name, but also I'm going to expand on how we get better benefits to minorities under our side. Okay, firstly then on how we benefit learning. Just a couple of bit of context here. I think ChatGPT is pretty new and exciting. I mean, we're having a debate about it, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do for you here is step through the mechanism and then the outcome because they're kind of unique. So firstly, on engagement, 2 things here. We think students see it as exciting, it's novel, it's interesting. I think it's far more engaging than your teacher writing an essay from 20 years ago on the whiteboard. Secondly, we think it can be used as a jumping off point for discussion. This looks like, and this kind of defends against the thing about just spitting out answers. This looks like getting ChatGPT to generate you an essay, and then the students have to go through and highlight what are good bits of analysis, or annotate what is good and what isn't, right? So we think we need to give teachers some credit. They know how to use things as an educational tool rather than just a mindless algorithm spitting out things. But thirdly, we think it reduces the burden on teachers. Why? Because they don't have to spend all this time looking for people who are cheating with ChatGPT. I've already flagged for you why it's very logistically difficult. So in an education system that is already stretched to the max, we really don't have any more time for teachers to be trawling through essays trying to find the hallmarks of AI, right? Finally, and this is really important, we think it equalizes learning outcomes. Why? Because people are likely to cheat on both sides. I've already flagged with that for you. But some kids won't cheat, either because they just really value academics and like integrity and stuff like that, or because they're a minority who think they will be treated more harshly if they are like caught for cheating or something. Because I think it's fair to say that minorities probably face worse harms in the education system than just like some straight white guy, right? So what that means is we get better equality on our side of the house because students are able to access this tool equally rather than only people who don't have to worry so much about the consequences of cheating being able to use it. So at the end of this point, I think what you should believe is not only that it enhances the learning experience and it gets students more engaged, which is important if you care about their learning and their ability to retain information, but also that it makes education just better at the point in time where it's firstly more equal, but also teachers just have more time to actually care about teaching. But secondly then, and I'd just like to note that this is a completely separate pathway to victory for us on how we prepare students better for the future. So I think we heard from side F that like, don't worry, it's not helpful for the future because it's just intuitive and you can put in the prompt and you actually don't need to be taught how to use it. I'd just like to flag that I think that's a little bit of a contradiction within their own case when they also told us it's going to develop so rapidly and be so impossible to detect. Like, I don't think that then you can just say it's very easy to understand what's happening. So with that in mind, and a couple of other pieces of context here, ChatGPT has already developed like user interfaces that businesses can use to like write strategy reports, write emails, that sort of thing. And just AI is rising at such a rapid rate, I think we can agree it's quite likely to be prevalent in business in the future. So with that in mind, we think broadly four things. One, under our side of the house, when teachers aren't seen as being antagonistic, as banning ChatGPT, as trying to restrict students from something they want to use, students are more receptive to dialogue around the harms that it might have. So if they want to talk about misinformation, if they want to talk about deepfakes or anything like that, we think that you get worse under their side of the house at the point in time where students simply don't listen to people telling them about the harms because they think they're just like old people who don't want them to do good in school. Okay, see, so the comparative under our side of the house, teachers are able to engage with their students. So like, yes, we think there are a lot of benefits, but you also need to be wary of X, Y, Z things. Students are far more likely to be receptive to that. Secondly, we think children need to learn to interact in a way that's beneficial. Why? Because it's going to be in the workplace in the future. I think both sides agree. It's not possible for them to claim the same benefit. A, because it's hypocritical for teachers to be like, this is a terrible thing, but also you need to use it in the workplace in the future. I think students will just kind of buy out and disengage because that's confusing messaging. But secondly, I think it's not fair to say that you just put in a prompt. I think there's more nuance, and they probably agree with that in their own case when they talk about how it's going to be so amazing in the future, right? Finally here, we think that teachers need to learn to interact before it becomes impossible to detect. They need to learn to make the education elastic. They need to be able to work with these companies to get on board, develop the versions of the technology that has an educational focus. I think that you should weigh this so highly because it's far more long-term than anything we've heard from side F. So understand.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite to the floor the second speaker of the affirmative team.
It is not
enough for NEG to come out today and say that they allow people to cheat and people to use AI in any circumstance, because that's completely fine, because that'll be what the future is. We've given you many reasons as to why we actually get better outcomes for people in the future. 3 things I'm going to be doing for you in my speech today. Firstly, I'm going to be doing like a clash on whether we're like which sides actually see people cheating. Secondly, one on like which side has like better students' education. And thirdly, just like a substantive extension on Ethan's point about which like how AI disproportionately affects those that are like using versus like aren't using. Okay, so firstly on this clash around like which side will actually see like people cheat. Here we heard like if like NEG come back and like say that like people are still gonna cheat, people are gonna like go through VPNs and like you don't only just cheat with like AI. A few responses to this. Firstly, we still greatly reduce this because it's banned in schools. When it's banned in schools, people don't want to be like caught doing it in the schools. They won't be doing it. Therefore, we greatly still reduce that. Secondly, there's going to be punishments for people who do plagiarize. We've like step this out quite clearly in our model. So like what this means is that like people will be like scared to cheat because they'll have these consequences if they do cheat. That's like really harmful for them, and that means like they can like whole like school record could like go down, so they wouldn't want to cheat because of that. Thirdly, if we even take them at their best and say people still cheat, we still think it's far worse on their side because it isn't like it's normalized. Using ChatGPT is allowed, and like that's acceptable. So we see that that's still normalized. Then they just said like you can cheat by like writing someone else's essay and stuff. We say that's like still way harder. Like writing someone's essay versus like going on ChatGPT and telling them to write your essay. It's like someone taking like 2 hours to write the essay for you versus someone taking like 1 minute to write like an essay that's going to get you like an excellence. We think it's like largely work on their side. Okay, then what else we heard from them is like they heard that like people won't use like ChatGPT and like for plagiarism and stuff like that. But like a few reasons like why they like we told you that like people will use ChatGPT, but they just claim like smart people like won't use it at all. Like a few reasons why they actually would use it, because it if like people that are like were below them before using it and now getting better marks than them, they can't really stand for this because they like want to be getting those marks, so they will start using them. We think that's like quite inherently bad because that means we have not as many people who have like critical thinkers, which is like an exclusive benefit that people will be looking out for in the future, because if everyone starts using ChatGPT, we don't really have anyone that's like critically thinking on their own. Secondly, it's like again normalized, and then like thirdly we tell you that like ChatGPT like generates like your answer like to the perfect model to get you the right grade, so we see that it's like far more harmful on their side. Okay, so like at the end of this, I think we take out why like people will still cheat like more on their side, which is like quite harmful. And even if they say like that's fine for them to cheat, I'm going to bring you some points as like why that's actually worse for people with like students like general critical thinking on the second clash, which I'll move on to now. So I'll take a POI now.
Do you think it's better if students are more engaged because the technology is novel?
Well, even if the students are more engaged in technology is novel, I think they can engage outside of school when they're like not plagiarizing. That you can still like get to know how ChatGPT works outside of school. Still use it. You don't have to like use that like particularly to like write that essay. I think you can still. If it's like something that's developing, it's just generally something that you catch on to. I don't think that's like relatively that exclusive. No, thank you. In terms of like the second clash, we heard like their claim here that it like doesn't teach. Like, it teaches, like, people, like, research in schools. It's really good for, like, research and stuff like that, and teaches people how to use AI. A few responses for this. Firstly, we told you already, like, it's quite easy to use AI. You just type in, like, a question, and then, like, it spits out, like, the perfect answer for you. So people can, like, quite easily use it. Secondly, we told you that ChatGPT is, like, quite fast-moving because, like, the nature of tech. They said that this was, like, a contradiction because, like, we're telling you that first it's, like it's quite easy to understand, but then it's fast moving. Note here, I'm going to tell you why it actually isn't a contradiction. We tell you that actually what we mean here is that like when it's quite easy to understand is like when the teachers will be teaching in school, they'll be teaching like the key words you put on the questions to ask ChatGPT for the perfect answer, right? And then therefore those like keywords would generally change, but that's still relatively easy to understand on either side. So we do think that those 2 points still exist as to like why you teaching people how to use AI is like not that big of a benefit that they can claim. Also, we heard them like we like brought you so much material into like how like this actually helps students research and like develop ideas. We told you that ChatGPT generally just spits out like the perfect answers, so not actually good for like developing your critical thinking, which is like really important. Like, why is this? Because like when you're researching in general, you have to like sort through resources, evaluate them, choose which one's good, Then secondly, you have to actively understand the content and stuff that resource has to be able to use it in the essay. Then you have to tailor it to what you're trying to what answer you're trying to do. They told you SparkNotes is able to help you with that. No, it's not. SparkNotes gives you a general theme of what the thing what the book is about or something. Doesn't give you the tailored answer to an essay question, which they can do because they'll just put the NCA question explain and describe, and they'll get the perfect essay out, and therefore that's really, really harmful because plagiarizing is just generally not a thing we can stand for. I'll move on to my split now around how AI and skills disproportionately affect those that aren't using it. So there's two reasons why this is true. When everyone is using it and you're not the one using it, you're the one getting the worst grade, and because AI generates the perfect answer, right? We've both kind of agreed that AI gives you the better marks, and then people will be incentivized by that. Secondly, if everyone uses it, we tell you that the grade boundaries will go up because everyone's grades will be better. So if the grade boundaries go up, it looks like people that aren't using the AI not doing as well. Okay, what are the outcomes of this? If you're going to be disadvantaged if you're not using it because you can no longer achieve that grade that you used to achieve because the grade boundaries have gone up because people are using these perfectly modeled answers. Therefore, you can't get there. This also creates wrong expectations, which they kind of also claim on their side for teachers. We tell you that teachers will now think that their students are doing so well because they'll do this digital test and they're oh, my students are doing so well because they'll put the perfectly generated AI answer on there. However, when they do it on paper, they wouldn't be doing as well. This means that if the teachers are only doing digital tests, they'll just think that kids are doing well and they won't actually teach them again. The impact of this, the students won't actually understand a lot of the content. They'll just be having the perfect answers. This is not really good because when they leave and they actually have to critically think themselves, not everything in the future will just have be able to magically be answered by AI. They can't do that because they don't have the skills to do that, which I've already kind of proved to you in my previous clash. And then secondly, another impact is that it creates more people, an incentive for more people to start using AI. Why is this? Because people that won't we're just using it for positively to research and find ideas. They want to now use it for the reason of getting better marks and doing better because people that were below them are now doing higher than them. And then secondly, people that were just never going to use it because they were against it because they're high academic achievers or whatever, they want to use it because they can't be left out because then their whole record goes down. They're no longer able to get top in class. The person who used to be the bottom of class is getting it. That's really harmful for them. They're not able to get that on their record. Really, really bad. So overall, what we achieve here is that we get actually better outcomes in terms of students and their critical thinking. We think this is really, really important. Should be weighted quite highly. But we also show you why actually they get worse outcomes for cheating and why that is bad and inherently exclusive to their side. So proud to affirm.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the second speaker of the negative theme to the floor.
Starting my speech. 3, 2, 1. Look, I hate to use this phrase, but quick sense check. Using ChatGPT doesn't lead to a loss of every single bit of your critical thinking. Look, you're still in school, you're still getting taught, you still have teachers talking to you about classwork. Using ChatGPT doesn't look like having earpods in and not listening to a single word of your teachers. That's unrealistic. Canterbury needs to engage with the fact that ChatGPT is a mechanism for learning, not the only route. What will I do in my speech today? Firstly, I'll give you so many reasons on why ChatGPT is hard to detect. Secondly, does ChatGPT degrade education? Thirdly, will it be truthful? Fourthly, on academic integrity. And then fifthly, on their split. Firstly, then, on 5 reasons why AI writing is hard to detect. Firstly, I think all the tools used for detecting it aren't available to all teachers. That means that you have less tech-savvy teachers that probably don't even know that ChatGPT exists, but also good AI detecting software is just relatively expensive. That leaves out marginalized schools and things like that, and that's harmful. But secondly, we tell you that AI is constantly evolving, which means it continually comes up with ways to beat the software and evolve it and catch it as it adds to its language. Thirdly, we tell you that any student with high half a brain cell will just change some words to make sure that it doesn't get picked up in general, and that means it doesn't get detected. But fourthly, we tell you that teachers don't have time. Look, when you have 5 classes with 30 students, that's 150 assessments. You don't have the time to be able to put that through with also doing the things that normal humans do in their lives. Fifthly, Clara told you, just use a VPN. Lastly, I want to prove to you that this is just a snowballing point. That is to say 2 things. Firstly, the longer AI is around for, the more it evolves, the more it updates, the more it is harder for this software to tell, and the more work is needed on this software. Secondly, the longer AI is around, the more humanistic it becomes and the more developed. What does that mean for the debate? 2 things. A, I think on their side of the house they have an inherently fair system. That is to say, we prove to you why that some people will always cheat on both sides of the house. What that means is, as some people use it, they'll get a leg up, and that's inherently harmful. Look, our side of the house, ChatGPT isn't cheating, it's a mechanism for learning, and we're really, really proud to stand for that. If you think that academic integrity and fairness in education is a good thing, I think we win principally on that. Secondly then, will ChatGPT be truthful? Look, the underlying mechanism here is that it's not, because it's an AI and AI isn't able to engage with truth. What do we say? We say, 1, it's constantly evolving and it's literally OpenAI's like baby child, right? What that means is that they're incredibly likely to invest loads of resources in it to get it better in the long term. That looks like the fact that they put checks and balances in it to be able to push out information. It looks like when you ask controversial questions about climate change, that there's literally a warning telling you that this information might not be true and that you need to do your own research about it. What that means is you're unlikely to get misled, but also we tell you that most people don't buy into what an AI is saying. They're more likely to do their own research because most people just don't think what an AI is saying is actual truth and actual fact. But we tell you B, yeah, sure, maybe there is misinfo, but truth is more consistent, and so it's statistically more likely. That means that on a basis, you're more likely to get factual statements than you are to get false statements. That is due to the fact that there are more factual statements on the internet than false statements in general, at least from the resources that ChatGPT engages with. See, we tell you that people usually fact check to get good grades, and that means you're unlikely to get this false info in general. Into that clash, I think ChatGPT being truthful is relatively negligible and shouldn't factor into your OA, the point in time that all those mechanisms I just gave and all the other material we gave you at class. Alright then, on to does ChatGPT degrade education? Look, the mechanism we get here is that writing is important. I think I don't really care because children probably still learn how to write with or without ChatGPT in general. But even if you do care, I think firstly teachers still have the incentive to teach how to write, right? And just to teach in general, because A, it's literally their jobs. Teachers don't get paid a lot, and that means they have incentives to go into these subjects because they're super passionate about it, because they want to teach kids in general, and they just get paid to do it. But we tell you that B, teaching itself is never worse on our side of the house. Why is that? Because it only applies to assessments, right? Because ChatGPT is a cheating mechanism, as they wanted to push. It's literally only in assessments, it's not in class, and that means all the material around the degradation of learning isn't actually true at the point in time that it isn't degradation of learning, because the only thing at the absolute best that gets degraded is assessments. Lastly, I'll flip this, right? Because I'll talk to you, because of all the reasons we gave you about engagement at Clara, and why that makes learning way more entertaining. Look, criticalness and entertaining is just so much more important, right? What is more entertaining? Being lectured by your teacher for an hour about the importance of a full stop, or getting ChatGPT to write a poem about the importance of a full stop? I think students are always more likely to engage with things like comedy, with the fact that ChatGPT is just kind of funny, right? At the point in time that it just says some really random things, and you're like, that's kind of funny. That means you get more engagement. That means you actually get students listening in English class, which is probably a pretty big benefit on our side of the house. What that means is you're unlikely to degrade education, you're actually likely to make it better. Look, they don't respond to the structural analysis we give you at Clara on why these points are really, really important. I think that means that all of that material still stands in general. Yes?
Do you think that writing and researching are skills that can be practiced and improved upon?
Yes, sure, but I think you can still practice and improve your writing on either side of the house. But look, I think you're still likely to go into research and keep writing. I think you're likely to fact check. I think you're likely to put it into your own words. I think those things still engage with that, but also the fact in time that you just have in class time where you write a story, right? I think that means you probably don't use ChatGPT on unmarked assessments at the point in time. You probably don't put a lot of weight in them. That means you're still likely to get that development there in general. Alright, on academic integrity, this is their material that they give you around cheating. Look, they tell us that it will greatly reduce cheating because you ban it in schools. Look, I think the framing we give you at Clara, that it's only an internals mean that it probably doesn't do that, at a point in time that people who are still likely to cheat do it outside of school and such don't engage with the banning, but they tell us that it's normalized and that cheating is worse because it's
on our side because it's harder on their side. I think firstly, one, it's literally not cheating on our side. You're allowed to do it. We just tell you that you probably just put it as a source, right? You probably put it as like, I got help. It's like the point in time that you ask your parents for help. I think it's a relatively similar mechanism. But secondly, it's just not really important, right? Because any like essay that ChatGPT does, you probably need to do more work on it to get good grades. You probably actually have to put effort into it. Look, the difference on our side of the house at their best is that you go from failing to passing. Let me tell you why that is really, really important. Because they don't deal with the underlying mechanism on why cheating is incredibly bad and why it's self-reinforcing. What is that mechanism? It's a dissolution with a system that constantly tells you that you're wrong, constantly tells that you're not good enough, that you need to try better. That means you are constantly more likely to cheat, and it's a snowballing effect at the point in time that you're constantly told that you're not good enough. Why do we deal with that? Because A, on our side of the house, teachers are more knowledgeable about ChatGPT, and that means they're more likely to know, they're more likely to talk to a student about it and see what they'll do well. But B, on our side of the house, students just aren't failing, right? That means that they think they're good enough. That means they probably engage more in class because they think they're actually good enough. They think they have a chance to do well in school, and that means they're likely to engage with their teachers more, and that's really, really important. End of that clash, what do we prove? We prove that academic integrity is at least symmetrical and doesn't really change on either side of the house. I think that means that you should care more about the mechanisms of engagement. But also, let me just flag that all the material about why education is much, much better in the long term because you're able to engage with the system, because AI is just likely to be the future, right? It means that children are now able to engage with it. It means you probably get more people going to things like software design. You probably get more people caring about these things in general. They just do better in life at the point in time that they're able to engage with it. On their grade boundaries point, look, quickly flip it. This is what happens on their side, right? At the point in time that everyone on our side is able to do it, and in such you don't get a harm at the point in time that grade boundaries are equal for everyone. Look, we have equal education on our side of the house. That's really, really important. End of my speech. What did I prove? We prove that we get academic integrity. We prove that we don't get a degradation in education. We prove that it's really hard to detect. In such, they have unfairness. In such, we win. Proud to stand.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the third speaker of the affirmative team to the floor.
I think much of the case we heard from Otago really misses the mark because they don't actually engage with what ChatGPT usage looks like in classrooms. What it looks like is extensive usage for every single thing, whether it's a menial task or an assessment. What it looks like is over-reliance on one technology to get something, because that is how you're getting your good grades. It leads to you only using this because that's where you succeed. You see less engagement with class, you see less learning outcomes overall. What am I going to do in this speech? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about what ChatGPT usage actually looks like, how we see detection, how we see less cheating on our side of the house. Secondly, I'm going to talk about outcomes for learning. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about future implications on ChatGPT. That's where they dictated most of their substantive material as well. Okay, now, what does ChatGPT actually look like, and why do people who actually use it mostly use it for plagiarism? I think there's 3 reasons why people are likely to engage in ChatGPT. Number 1, firstly, people believe that ChatGPT is superior to their own work. At the point in time they believe this, they're likely to overly rely on it, since they don't trust their own work to engage in it. This means that they're less likely to learn, more likely to rely on solely ChatGPT to solve their projects and stuff like that. We don't see learning, we don't see critical thinking, we just see copying and pasting the essay, editing a couple of words to try and get it past the detector or something like that. Secondly, I think it's simply less time and effort and requires requires a lot less learning and thinking for people to use it. What this means is it's not just going to be for exams. It means it's also going to be for homework as well. Because all of a sudden, like, instead of spending half an hour like completing your English homework, you can just plug the query into a question, plug the query into like your ChatGPT like generator or something like that. Get the answer already. You don't understand the homework. That means you don't have the foundational basis for exams later on. You like undercut the entire education system at its core, since everyone's just using ChatGPT to get their knowledge. Third thing here is it just like takes 30 seconds to like create ChatGPT versus like several hours of work. People with no time, such as athletes, such as people like with a part-time job or something like that, or like someone with like a generally disadvantaged background in terms of time, like maybe they come from like a poorer area of town or something like that, they're more likely to engage it with it as well. That means we see disproportionate effects on like lower groups. Note, once you get into this habit, it like extrapolates, you become more and more reliant on ChatGPT. Since one, it undercuts your learning, and two, you likely see like you're achieving greater success with it. That means you're more likely to use it in the future. And also, this can apply to people who like use it for like research purposes as well, because like they see that like ChatGPT is so easy, it like cuts down so much time on research, they're more likely to use it there. Okay, I'll take a POI quickly.
Why is in-class learning actively harmed?
Because people are using ChatGPT instead of their brains to answer in-class learning. Okay, right. We also see that people are still cheating. I think we see less people cheating on outside the house. 3 reasons here. Firstly, I think we greatly reduce the capacity to cheat insofar as you have no access in the schools. It's generally made illegal. People don't really want to break the law and do like illegal things in regards to their learning. Secondly, I think we see severe punishments on outside the house, such as like a not achieved or a disqualification from the exam if you're like using ChatGPT. And I think thirdly, we don't normalize it in school culture. This means we see less people engaging in it. It becomes like stigmatized if you use ChatGPT to like generate your essays and stuff like that. What responses do we see here? We see that they have other cheating mechanisms such as plagiarism, or people like writing essays for you. In terms of plagiarism, I think it's very easy to check for plagiarism, and that like most online assignments automatically go through a plagiarism checker. That means people won't be using plagiarism on outside the house either. Second thing here is they say that other people are writing essays. I think it's pretty easy to see when like a straight A student suddenly gets an excellence that they've like gotten someone else to write their essay. And then secondly, it's just like very easy to detect and stuff like that. Now in terms of it, why is this bad for exams in particular? I think what this leads to is like an over-reliance on ChatGPT. Since it's very convenient, this leads to students struggling in the exams. It has the exact same effect as not doing your homework, because you essentially aren't doing it. People don't do their homework, suck in exams, since they don't actually do the learning, because they're just relying on ChatGPT due to the convenience and due to that fact that it's likely better for their own stuff. No, thank you. Then they said it's really hard to detect. 4 ways you can achieve detection. Firstly, I think we see teacher's judgment. Like a teacher knows like what their student's quality is. They're likely to know if it's like generated by ChatGPT. Like if one student suddenly makes like a really big jump off paper to another, they probably think something's going on there. Secondly, there's AI detection software. I think like as AI becomes more prevalent, the government might provide subsidies for something like that. Thirdly, I think we're also likely to see AI detection software offered by like ChatGPT itself in the future, insofar as it will be like quite a demand for that as a product to like generate this. And then fourthly, I think they'd likely just ask questions to the student to understand their learning of the topic. It actually encourages better teaching, so they can get around like students just coming in essays. We see like more engagement with the students learning their better teaching. So on the basis of that, I think what we actually see in terms of ChatGPT is really wide-scale usage, really like overt usage. What it looks like is just copy and pasting an essay from ChatGPT into your essay, since it's so much more convenient for the reasons I outlined there. We've run that right down our case. We never actually saw engagement with that. All they talked about was how it's like an assistant to learning. But there's actually no reason why you would use it to assist your learning when it becomes so much more easier, especially if you buy their analysis on how it's so hard to detect. If it's so hard to detect, like as they've been arguing, people are just more likely to use it since they can't detect it. Now on learning, I think that's the first claim they get here on learning is that they get more engagement when like people are using ChatGPT because ChatGPT is so fun and wacky. I think this is just a bit of a weird claim to make, since like I don't think ChatGPT is particularly interesting. People are also already like engaging with it outside of class. It's not like it's basically just Google and stuff like that. I don't think it's particularly interesting. Secondly, I think people are actually less likely to engage in the lesson provided by the teachers since they know that they can just go home and plug in like the learning and the topic into ChatGPT, they're less likely to listen to the teachers since they know they have that backdrop. What we actually see here is less engagement in class. It's what the teacher is telling you, but all of a sudden becomes less valuable since this really easy alternative exists. Right. The second thing here is that they say that it's like equalizing/learning minorities. I think equalizing like minorities' learning outcomes. I think we actually brought you very convincing analysis at Ethan here. How like oftentimes ChatGPT, since it's like built upon like bias, like learning, like bias, like algorithms, stuff like that, will actually disadvantage minorities. We saw very little engagement at first or second around that. Right. And then the last thing on learning is that like it only affects like assessments and exams since that's the only time ChatGPT used. I think this is just like a gross mischaracterization of what like the usage of ChatGPT looks like. And it's going to be extensively used in class since it saves so much time. It likely produces better policy work and stuff like that. We're going to see ChatGPT used in class. It doesn't just affect assessments. It affects every single asset of the schooling system. Now, onto the stuff about the snowball effect. I actually think what we see with the snowball effect is an increasing reliance on ChatGPT, which is bad because it just stops you from actually thinking. It stops you from actually practicing your writing skills. It stops you from actually learning, as we've outlined right down our case. Why is this? I think it's because when students like become so reliant on ChatGPT, they like are more likely to use it because it creates better grades. It's all they're used to. Like if you keep on using it like so often in 1 year, you're like not going to actually be where you're meant to be with your learning. That leads you to like relying on ChatGPT more in that first year, more ChatGPT in the next year. I think the snowball effect causes more usage of ChatGPT. It's really harmful for all the reasons we've outlined earlier. Right, now on this content on future. I think this is sort of fallen out as a debate, but I think we've provided that like ChatGPT like really often adapts and stuff like that. You cannot learn it, like makes it easier. You can't like learn and adapt in the future. We said use in other areas like outside of class and stuff like that. So at the end of this debate, Canterbury stands on the side of education. They stand on the side of plagiarism. That's why we won.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech and would like to invite the third speaker of the negative team to close us out for the substantial portion of the debate.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's take a look at Av's case. They said our brain cells stop. They said I stopped practicing. They said I don't talk, I only get onto ChatGPT. Does something sound wrong here? Yeah. I think teachers exist. Yeah. I think schools exist. Yeah. I think you probably can't use ChatGPT to write your essays. They are not that good of a program because they mischaracterize this use because they do not engage with our analysis on those grounds. They cannot win. Alright, a couple of questions here. Firstly, building a clear framework. Secondly, I'll talk to you about future applications and why that is really important before going over does it work, development, and finally education. Okay, framework, 3 parts here. Firstly, usage. They tried to say the only reason you would use ChatGPT is to produce superior work because it's quick, because it's used for research. Couple of analyses here. Firstly, it's kind of symmetric, right? You could probably go online, find another essay, find like notes on MOOC or like SparkNotes, which satisfy all of those incentives. But like, what's the difference here is we are not using ChatGPT to do everything. Look, we think schools exist. Look, we think teaching is not affected by this debate. What we wanted to tell you was we want to use it as a starting point. We want to use it as a mechanism, as a facilitation, as an entry point. This is so likely because it like makes the easy stuff simpler. That is getting facts, getting the basic knowledge, and the engaging stuff, that is thinking, that is talking, that is extrapolating, is not affected there. Secondly, courses and relevance. Look, they wanted to talk about writing, let's talk about writing. They tried to claim ChatGPT gets perfect grades. No. Couple of reasons here. Firstly, it's writing, right? You have to synthesize your own ideas. I think we all had that in year 11. Pretty straightforward, right? But fundamentally, why ChatGPT doesn't do as well is that because it's not human. It can't think like a human, and you are being assessed on communication. Therefore, ChatGPT isn't as crazy as they wanted to say at the end of this, it's clear that there is some degree of symmetry, and that ChatGPT is largely unrelated with the learning, with like the creative process they tried to care so much about. Secondly, then, let's go on and talk about future applications. Look, they hardly responded to this. Why is this so important? 3 reasons here. Firstly, because it affects a massive number of people, right? Literally everyone who graduates out of secondary and tertiary education is influenced by this. Secondly, it probably impacts how they work, how they live, how they do their job. That is, the magnitude of the impact is very, very important. Thirdly, this is likely to get more and more important in society as they try to talk about. Okay, couple of extensions here because like they haven't had any response here. Firstly, why is it so likely to be a dominating factor in workplaces? 4 reasons. 1, it's really easy, right? It's easier to use ChatGPT than a person. They help us here. Secondly, it's probably a lot cheaper. Look, you don't need to pay ChatGPT a wage, an hourly wage. Thirdly, competition. Firms don't want to be outcompeted. Fourthly, they want to keep up with AI. They want these relationships. At the end of this, 4 pathways to why every single company will probably use ChatGPT. Look, by their own, look, okay, what does this look like when we get assimilation under our side of the house? Under our side of the house, people in schools use this program. They are familiar with it. They interact with it. They know how it works. Couple of benefits here. Firstly, under our side of the house, you actually talk about the harms, talk about the imperfections. Look, on their side of the house, they probably hate their teachers or their university counselor who like sends emails saying, "Don't use ChatGPT, guys. It kind of sucks." The animosity there is quite obvious. So on our side, we get a better understanding of a dominating factor. But secondly, this looks like our students actually working well, right? This looks like them using ChatGPT to perform simple tasks as writing summaries, as sending emails. This means they are not being massively outcompeted and losing their jobs under their side of the house. Look, I think that's debate-winning material when we are dealing with the future, when education is about the future fundamentally. If you don't buy that, here's why we can still win. Okay, before I move on, I'll take a few.
Yeah. Do you think that what's done in schools is quite different from what's done in the workplace in terms of critical thinking skills?
Look, I think critical thinking probably applies in the workplace as well, especially when you have to critically think about how you are going to interact and use ChatGPT. Alright, before I talk about education in general, 2 layers of why we are already winning. Firstly, does it work? Look, most of the analysis relies on complete abstinence from ChatGPT. Right, so therefore, if we can prove even some extent of it not working, their material is massively harmed. Look, we gave you so much analysis here, we think we've had an insufficient response. An additional problem is that AI is developing quickly. They can probably change links, they can probably change their programs. So that's our first layer there. Secondly, they haven't responded to why OpenAI would probably develop programs to fit education policies, right? A couple of incentives for them here. Firstly, they probably want the reputation. They want to say, look, we created an AI which is helping education, everyone likes it, this is so good. And secondly, they just get more people using it. What this looks like is like AF gets a version of OpenAI with everything they want. Look, they can just adapt policies to leave out writing, have disclaimers, maybe list stuff as facts, not essays. Look, with those incentives, we think it will happen at some point. All these solutions are brought to them under the side neck. Finally, even if you don't buy that, let's talk about education. At the top of this clash, what is really important? We tell you 2 things. Firstly, engagement. Why? Because engagement is really, really fundamental. It strategically interacts with everything. That is to say, if you don't have engagement, you don't get the learning outcomes you want to talk about. Secondly, we tell you justice is really important. That is to say, fairness. That is to say, equal accessibility. 1, because of its principal importance. Secondly, because how it fuels into other forms of discrimination, right? Alright, okay, let's go over why we win this clash. Firstly, we tell you engagement is really important. What we told you is twofold. Firstly, that some people just find it entertaining. They tried coming up here and saying, look, third AF, I don't personally find this very entertaining. We think there's always some people who are going to be engaged by this, right? This is especially important when children are being exposed to technology at an earlier age. But secondly, more importantly, and to very little response, we say it's a platform of accessibility. Look, picture a person who is being discriminated against, who probably don't have the time, don't have the resources, they don't want to constantly fail, They don't want to be constantly told they are not good enough. What ChatGPT provides is a simple way of going in, not reliance, but going in at a basic level so they can build on from there. This is a unique platform of accessibility, which is unique to our side. They helped us when they said how important or impactful ChatGPT is. Alright, what does engagement mean here? This means under our side of the house, students are actually engaging. That means under their side of the house, there is necessarily an exclusive portion of students who fail, who drop out. We think this is the worst possible education outcome. They probably agree with us here, so that's fundamentally why we are winning this clash. Secondly, let's talk about fairness. Look, I already dealt with this in my intro when we said that ChatGPT can't transform grades. The higher grade, best results is where the analysis lies. Now let's tell you where this point actually lies. It lies at the point where students are going from not achieved to achieved. We think this is a massive difference, and it creates a massive injustice. When minorities fear being discriminated, fear the consequences of using ChatGPT, at least at the very worst, under our side of the house, it's universally accessible, and without impacting the creativity, the writing, we create justice. We stand against discrimination in education. At the end of this, we have at least 4 pathways to victory. They never dealt with our future implications. Proud to oppose.
Alright, I thank the speaker for their speech. Now, one of debating's greatest mysteries, we now reverse the speaking order. So, I'd like the leader of the negative team to the floor to conclude the speech case.
Cool, we're good to go. My speech. 3, 2, 1. What's Canterbury's pathway to victory in today's debate? They have to prove that there is a significant harm to education. If they don't do this, I think Otago wins. Why is that true? I think it has to be significant because a slight harm to education is relatively symmetrical. That is because the push for why it's harmful is that people cheating, and that's really, really bad. Look, that's relatively symmetrical, and so I think that pathway has to be incredibly significant for you to care about it a lot in your OA. What will I do on my leaders? Firstly, I'll talk to you about future. Secondly, does it work? Thirdly, on cheating. Fourthly, on better learning. Quickly then, on future, look, just quickly, this goes incredibly unresponded to by Canterbury. That means that if I can prove that it's incredibly important, that means you should probably care about it a lot. The only response we get is that third act, and it's at 7 minutes and 50 seconds. Alright, why is future important? Look, the longer AI is around for, the longer it becomes involved in society, and the longer it has impacts on people. That is to say that the longer it's around for, the longer it has impacts on lives, and in such you should care about it being involved into people's lives at an early age. That is to say that because of that, they are now able to get better in the future, and that's really, really important. Quickly, does it work? They say that it's got software and teachers. Look, we gave you so many responses, I'm not going to go through them, but I think this means that because it doesn't work, and it's unlikely that you are able to monitor it, means any degree of uncertainty vastly undermines a lot of Canterbury's case, and in such can't factor in a lot. I'm actually going to go into better learning before I go into cheating, because I think this is our main pathway to victory, and I'll prove to you why we get better learning so much better on our side of the house. What do they say? They talk about over-reliance on ChatGPT. They say it's bad for critical thinking, and they say that it's different to engagement. That there's no difference to engagement. We tell you that teachers know how to teach, and in such you probably still get teaching in general, and that's good because teachers are teachers, and they know how to teach, and I don't think that changes on either side of the house. But secondly, we tell you that teachers are stretched incredibly thin, and in such they shouldn't have to waste the time doing those checking mechanisms. Look, I think it's always much more important for teachers to be able to put more resources into teaching, more resources into coming up with entertaining activities for students than it is for them to be checking for something that literally doesn't have a lot of impact. Look, we framed to you why the impact is probably a student going from not achieved to achieved and why that's really, really important. Thirdly, we tell you that it's just incredibly equal on our side of the house because those that do it don't have to worry about the consequences and such they don't feel incredibly engaged by the system. But fourthly, we tell you that it's relatively novel, right? It's probably quite interesting. Alex told you why to children it's probably quite cool at the point in time that you get this AI that is telling you all this really, really interesting information. I think what that means is you probably engage more with learning, you probably listen to your teacher talk about full stops, and that's probably good for writing as I talked about at first. But we tell you fifthly, learning about harmed properly is exclusive to our side of the house, and that means it's not responded to there. Alright, end of that, I think we're able to prove we get better engagement in learning, and we're able to get more entertainment in learning. That means you're more likely to engage in learning, and that's really good because learning is good. Alright, lastly on cheating, what do they say? They say it's going to hurt other students and that it gets normalised. Look, I told you at second that the underlying mechanism of why cheating is not solved, happens is not solved by Canterbury. What does that mean? It means A, they fail students. They fail the students who are forced to work to help their family. They fail the students who are forced to do sports. They fail the students that are forced to debate way too much. Look, they actively make students more dissolved with the system in general. That's when they don't interact. That's when they zone out in class. That's when they don't listen to teachers. That's when they think they're not good enough. And that's when they think that they have no purpose in being in school. And that's when they don't involve with their teachers and get the learning that Canterbury wants to talk about was really, really important. Look, Canterbury forgets about the marginalised communities. That's not principally good because principally education is for everyone. I think Otago is a team that is able to prove that we get education for everyone, that we don't disinvolve, whatever the word is, students that are able to involve in the system, and now because they're able to involve in education more, that's really, really beneficial. End of my leaders, we proved to you that we get better learning, we proved to you that we help students that involve in cheating because that's symmetrical, we proved that it doesn't really work, and that fourthly, the benefits to future. We have 3 pathway to victories, Canterbury only has 1. I think our 3 are always going to be more important. Proud to stand.
Okay, I thank the speaker for their speech and would now like to invite the leader of the affirmative team to close us out for this round.
While I have great respect for Otago for arguing so eloquently such a hardline case, I think the fact that they ran that is their downfall. I think that in this world where you've got this ChatGPT being used often in the classroom, we've demonstrated a bunch of principal harms that are inherent to the system that they just don't deal with. So let's in the theme of, giving and stuff, let's take their case at the absolute best at all points of this and explain why we have still won. So let's start with cheaters versus non-cheaters. They want to claim that cheaters at their best are symmetrical. But I think, firstly, at their worst, that probably isn't true, as one, there's less friction or punishment on their side of the house, and there's a sense of normalization that everyone is doing it. But also, even if it is symmetrical, this doesn't prove any, 1% of what they think it seems to prove, because, non-cheaters still exist, and this is where the real point of differentiation actually happens on this side of the house. On their side of the house, non-cheaters will use ChatGPT because it's not considered cheating. On our side of the house, non-cheaters will not use ChatGPT because it's not considered cheating. So then what happens when we have a society where the average student, the non-cheater, uses ChatGPT instead of just the cheaters on their side of the house? Well, because ChatGPT is no longer considered cheating, non-cheaters on their side will start to use it where they otherwise wouldn't. But also because of that grade boundary mechanism that Arnhem said, where all the grades are kind of pushed up, and so you have to use ChatGPT to accommodate. This means that there are more students using ChatGPT on a wider scale for way, way, way more of their assessments. On our side of the house, if somebody isn't a cheater and they want to do an assessment, they'll write it up, right? If they want to research something, they'll Google it, they'll scroll through and read through the articles. On their side, they will ChatGPT it, they'll see the bullet point answers. On their side, they'll get an answer written up and they'll copy and paste it in. That's the distinction on these 2 sides of the house. So then what happens when more on our side of the house, there are more people not practicing these core skills? Well, they've tried to claim that it's just that we think their brain cells will stop working, that there's not a mix between that through a mix of the 2 things, people will still know how to write. I think that's a ridiculously large mischaracterization of our case, because our point was way more nuanced than that, and I guess a bit scarier for them to respond to. Because critical thinking and English skills, as we've claimed, is things that get better with practice, right? If we have 10 times the hours of English skills, sure, people on that side of the house might be able to write, but people on our side of the house would be able to write, research, critically think 10 times better because they've had 10 times the practice. These are skills that get advanced over time. What that means is that when they have everyone, that average student of that side of the house, just unoriginally copy and pasting bullet point answers to save them time on things they consider pointless because they don't want to fill out a slideshow or whatever and present it to the class, and so they just ChatGPT copying stuff in because that's allowed on their side of the house. That means that they're not getting the practice that might feel inconvenient on our side of the house, but these good, decent students who aren't getting a VPN and go through all this friction to break the rules will then actually just do the work and they'll have more practice means they'll be better educated. They've tried to push back by talking about engagement in the future. We've completely demolished the future point basically from first. We're talking about how ridiculously easy it is to use these AIs. Like it's getting exponentially easier as these develop. But also on engagement, one, as Luke has kind of shown us all, ChatGPT isn't actually that crazy. Like novelty wears off. So, like a point entirely based on novelty is just inherently on a timer. There's some chronological bias from Otago in that point. But two, when you know, like an AI will just be able to spit out answers no matter how you listen in class, it means you're probably going to be less engaged in what the teacher is saying, as was also pointed out by us. Furthermore, even if you buy more engagement in a bad system that doesn't have kids practicing these skills is worthless. Engaging them in like just being able to copy and paste answers is worthless. On the future point, sure, maybe ChatGPT will be used more in the future, but we tell you it's a lot easier to learn how to use, like how to type in, fill in this report for me, enter, than it is to like write this report yourself, right? To be able to have adaptable skills that you can apply to a bunch of different reports, even without AI. For this, we very clearly win. Thank you so much.
Okay, I thank all speakers for what was a genuinely engaging debate on what was probably a tried and true emotion by this point in the year. So I invite you guys to cross the floor. I'm going to shut the stream and we're all going to leave so the panel can come to their decision in private.
Okay, if you just have beef with like switching speaker orders, is that
Huh? Yeah, I just think it's weird.
every single time we've seen you, you've complained about it.
Yeah, I'm making my stand, you know?
Making your stand.
Yeah, it ends now.